it's the same thing that applies, that we do on the temporary event solutions. That we know that, okay, this beach, there are, let's say, a dozen beaches, in South Jersey. So, I mean, how to come up with a plan for the summer. So every winter we plan for the upcoming summer that
Mm-hmm.
based on the traffic, that happened in the, that the T-Mobile occurred in the last 2 years, I would say. So we looked at the
Mm-hmm.
trend analysis and then come up with a solution, how to best serve the T-Mobile customers.
All right.
Besides that, I've also worked on the new feature deployments, working
Mm-hmm.
closely with T-Mobile regional as well as headquarter teams and Ericsson. Ericsson, by the way, is the main vendor for T-Mobile in the Northeast. Uh,
Uh-huh.
so New Jersey market, all of the equipment that we deploy here in T-Mobile is Ericsson equipment. So so basically work with the vendors like Ericsson and as well as headquarter teams and R&D teams to deploy the new features like ERAN
Mm-hmm.
trial we did CRAN trial, we did LAA deployments on DAS, we did RDS system, that's the radio dot system, that's the new 5G system from Ericsson.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, I'm working on the NR 600 solution. That's also 5G. In New Jersey market, we just launched about 300 sites in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then, okay, so that's for the new features. Just give me a minute. Let me just pull up something quick. Okay. Also,
Mm-hmm.
for in-building and outdoor solution, the major venue that I worked on is Newark Airport, and it's still ongoing. So
All right.
there are three terminals in Newark Airport: Terminal A, B, and C. We updated Terminal C last year for in-building DAS. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Now we are working, and that was on Terminal C. Now we are upgrading Terminal A and B with the with the DAS system, and as well as all the runways and tarmac area with the outdoor DAS.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a massive DAS deployment ongoing at Newark Airport that I was involved from the beginning and still ongoing. So hopefully by next year they will be able to complete the deployment. Um,
All right.
Besides
Okay.
that, I'm also working on. I actually worked on the L19 Lite project. So this is something that we came up with in our internal T-Mobile discussions. So this is also like a trial that we successfully delivered in New Jersey market. So
Mm-hmm.
what happened is, as I mentioned, that for every deployment that we do, there has to be a POR, right? So POR meaning
Mm-hmm.
that we have funding from the T-Mobile headquarters. So T-Mobile,
Mm-hmm.
so how the process works is that T-Mobile, like the markets do the analysis and then they give their wish list, let's say, to headquarters, for approval.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, T-Mobile New Jersey has, let's say, 2,300 cell sites overall. They want 1,500 sites to be added to, let's say, L1900 capacity project. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
once they give this list to the headquarters, do their own analysis in Seattle, and then they based on their analysis, they make a decision that out of 1,000 sites requested by New Jersey market, maybe they will approve about 800 sites or
Mm-hmm.
700 sites, right? So the rest of the sites in New Jersey market, they are 2,300 sites. They approved, let's say, 800 sites. So all the rest, like 1,300 sites that are left, I mean, but those we cannot deploy on 19 because we don't have funding from the headquarters. So,
Mm-hmm.
but we do have spectrum sitting, right? We have PCS spectrum sitting here that we are not utilizing. And the spectrum is one
Uh-huh.
of the very expensive assets any operator can have. They spend millions of dollars in acquiring spectrum from FCC.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, we came up with a plan that, we will deploy L19 on the sites that are not in the POR without any funding from the headquarters. So they assigned me, this task to basically do the analysis and see, okay, what kind of equipment we have on site, and how can we use the existing equipment with minimal, additional expense to deploy L19. So that's something that I came up with. I did analysis for over 1,700 sites, look at the existing configurations, and propose the L19 Lite solution. And then when they started deploying it, they actually, the headquarters, we presented our tech to the headquarters, for our initial 100 sites deployment, and they looked at it, and then they were impressed with it, and then they actually rolled this project out nationwide. So we were one of the initial, markets that actually came up with this idea, and then now it's being deployed nationwide. So that's something that's, that I would like to highlight in the resume. Besides that, I'm also, like, as I said, I was working on the new feature. So we did LAA, millimeter wave I'm currently working on. Millimeter wave is something that T-Mobile just started deploying in New York, in New Jersey. We don't have a POR, but it's still, the trials are ongoing at this time. So, so I'm basically working on the R&D side at this time. Basically working with the headquarters on the design documents, regional folks, with coming up with the strategy how we're going to deploy millimeter wave, as well as working with the real estate and site acquisition firms to see, what will be the feasibility of millimeter wave antenna, because the requirements for millimeter wave antenna are different from a traditional cellular antenna. So this antenna is, since this is a really high frequency, the guidelines for placing the antenna on the rooftop are different than a traditional antenna. So, I'm currently working with the FSA and other teams to come up with a plan how we can successfully deploy this to get the maximum out of it.
All right. Okay, so I have some questions for all of these projects. I'm going to go over them one by one, okay? Right. So for the first project that you mentioned, the L700 and then the L1900, and I believe you also mentioned an something that was post L19.
Capacity sector ad.
Yeah, the capacity sector. So these three projects, you had similar responsibilities for these three, right?
That is correct.
All right. So you were doing the site scoping and the RFDS and everything, and then eventually integration, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, for these, then, I'm going to talk about these collectively, all three projects. Were you leading a team for them?
Yes.
All right. Can you tell me what the team size was?
Five. Overall, we have about 10 engineers. Five engineers are dedicated on the design scope, and then three engineers are dedicated on the performance scope. So, overall it's a 10 engineer team, but on the design scope there are 5.
All right. So basically for all three projects, you were leading a team of 10 engineers, correct?
Yeah, you can say that.
All right. And then again, for the L700 project first, then, did you face any challenges with this project?
Yes, because that was one of the initial projects. So, the internal T-Mobile employees, they were not very familiar with the processes involved. So I was working with the senior management to come up with a process, with a strategy, how we're going to deploy that, how we're going to assign the tasks to every engineer, and come up with the trackers and creating like a Power BI reports to track every activity to make sure that nothing slips, because since we were working on, over 1,000 sites at a time, there's a very high possibility that, anything can slip, especially like, from scoping to RFDSs, delivery to CIQ, and especially E911 readiness. That's something that, the senior management and even the headquarters looks at very closely. So we have, so T-Mobile has internal tools like Element and Power BI reports, business intelligence reports. So data integrity, that's something that I was working on, to make sure that everything that we complete, is entered in the system. I was also doing on a regular basis, I would say like on a weekly basis, I was doing database audits to make sure that data integrity is correct, and anything that we are reporting to the headquarters and to the regional teams is correct, and make sure everything is accounted for. So So yeah, I mean, I would say that was one of the main challenge to make sure that all the tasks that we are assigned to are delivered on time, and
Mm-hmm.
as well as the quality is is something that T-Mobile is really focused on. So I mean, we have to make sure that anything that we provide to them
Mm-hmm.
is accurate, because I mean, once we deliver the RFDS, once we issue the RFDS, the development and construction folks, they order the material, and we're talking about millions of dollars of equipment. I mean, so we have to make sure that whatever we propose in the RFDS is 100% accurate, and we really need that equipment to build and complete a site.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that's one thing. And then the site scoping that you were doing, how were you making sure that the sites that you were selecting were optimal?
Well, I mean, so it depends on the objective, right? So I mean, as I said,
Yeah.
so there are two kind of objectives. You have coverage objective as well as capacity objective. So in
Mm-hmm.
coverage objective, we have to look at the POPs that the site will be covering. So I mean, T-Mobile has the internal planning tool called Asset. So I
All
was
right.
working in Asset, populating the sites, running propagation to make sure, that running different scenarios on each site to see, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, which scenario will fit best, and we can get the maximum coverage out of it. So,
All right.
so that's something that I was working on, on the coverage side. On the capacity side, we look at multiple things, right? We look at the traffic. So we look at the existing traffic, how many users this particular site is carrying on a daily basis. What are the
Mm-hmm.
peak hours? What is the traffic on the peak hours? If the site is serving any major attraction, like a water park, like a high school, like a college, like a
Mm-hmm.
mall or a hospital, so we consider that as well. We look at the traffic pattern, and then we look at the SINAR data. We look at the Starlink data, the
Mm-hmm.
density. So there are a couple of things that are in place that we look at, to identify, okay, exactly, what is the traffic pattern, how we can break the traffic, and how we can maximize our capacity, that the network can support, that the users are actually demanding.
All right, perfect. And were you also conducting any field or drive tests here to check things
Check what things?
like maybe the call drop rate? Drive testing is typically for, I believe, when you check if your connection is maintained, right? Something like that.
Yes, drive tests. Yes, drive tests we do to basically check the network health. We look at the
Mm-hmm.
RF environment, right? I mean, how